This week on Outside of the Box, we are recapping the October NHRL event, chatting with Beetleweight driver and builder Nate Franklin, as well as the 12-pound finalists, Business Cat and also Luke Grell, and the 30-pound winner, MIT team with Aries. So stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And as you know, I've been doing these previews and recaps. And of course, we're here to recap October NHRL. And as I typically like to do, I'm going to go ahead and start with talking about the 3 pounds. A lot of exciting stuff happened in the 3 pounds, as you know, typical for NHRL. But one of those I thought kind of a cool story was to see Nate Franklin and Drumder Child having a pretty good run. So I have Nate with me here to talk about that.
Hey, what's up? It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of get into it. We'll mostly talk about Drumder Child's Day, but just like the overall thoughts for the 3 pounds in that event. First of all, honestly, I always try and watch as much of the stream as possible. But there
Right,
was a
right.
period of time where like I had to step away and then I came back and I'm like, hey, like Drumder Child's still in it. And not that I'm overly surprised because you're obviously known as a very good driver, but the qualifying rounds didn't, they weren't dominant for you. You went two and
Right.
one and made it into the bracket. So, kind of the first thing I want to talk about is the beginning of the day and how that was because you did end up having the one loss. So, what did you do to kind of make sure to come back from that so that you could make it into the bracket?
So there were a few things that contributed to my first loss. Number one was my receiver went into bind mode because it's one of the FS2As that has a little button that you press to go into bind mode. So I think it like hit the side of the bot or hit something and then it bot just shut off. Second thing was I turned down my turn rates on my radio because I felt like because I can be a bit of a nervous driver, so I was overshooting a lot. And then Remy de Guzman helped me out with it, tuning my speed controller because when I was using it and I would go like 50% on the throttle, it would go like 100%. So if I cranked it, it would just go insanely fast and I would barely be able to drive. So there's really no like in between. And I definitely lucked out losing my first fight because if I won my first fight, my second match would have been against Monkfish. And I can guarantee I would have lost a frame and had to been down like one spare bot, been down to the spare. So honestly, I'm not too upset about that.
Yeah, I feel you because it's funny that you say that because really the only time that I competed at NHRL this year, of course, was in January, and my first match was against you. And
Yeah.
if I had won that match, I would have had to fight Mako.
Oh
And
yeah, you
in
definitely lucked out.
hindsight, I really wouldn't have wanted to have to do that. So
Yeah. And I embarrassingly just spilled water all over my shirt. But let's continue. That's not what's important right now.
yeah, so coming back from that, you said that with winning that second match, obviously like that's a good thing, and like you said, you had a more desirable opponent than having to fight Monkfish.
Oh, absolutely. Um, yeah. At that point, it was do or die, and then I get put on like the main stage, the cage two. So it's just like, yeah, I don't want to go home 0-2. And I thought I did. I mean, I won the match, so that was pretty good. Weapon went down. I don't know why. I just put it back in the test box afterwards, and it worked. So it works. So gonna keep on going.
Exactly. And the robot working is really half the battle in a lot of these cases. Now, getting into the bracket, I wouldn't say that your first match was an easy one because you
No,
had to go
no.
against Beetlejuice.
No, I was extremely nervous about Beetlejuice because obviously Ariel she won the Beetle bracket in the teams event and also because like every single one of Drumder Child's losses at Norwalk, well, I mean, it's two losses, but still we're against horizontals. So I was very concerned. Um, but I definitely just gave it my all in that. It was a really good fight. Hats off to Ariel for having a tough bot, and she put up a good fight. I definitely learned from that fight that I need to redesign some aspects of the bot, like the way the wheel guards are mounted, because she basically just like peeled off one of them. There's like a teeny tiny gap in between the front armor and the wheel guard, and I just managed to drive like a perfect match, just to not like her take out my wheels because that would have been a disaster. But I definitely lucked out on this. She told me after the fight that what happened was her belt like twisted, so she couldn't spin it up, but then at the very end, it like twisted uh back. So like the tooth part was still sticking out, but she could still spin it up at the post match functionality check. So that was good.
Yeah, yeah, certainly good for you.
Yeah,
uh
yeah.
yeah, and like if you weren't already, had your hands tied with one team pandemonium robot, in the very next round you got IDK to go up against that robot, which is previously qualified for finals. So kind of talk about that one.
For that, I was really interested to see how the fight would go because in the first fight against the when I fought the Honey Badger, the like hub motor vert, I didn't really get to see any major weapon on weapon hits, so I was really curious to see how it would fare because like I was talking to people after the June event, they said like when it comes to like fighting like the Peter Bar Drisk sort of like that is that um they can hit like any part of my drum and that'll like be in their favor. So they're not like it's not like oh they have a guaranteed way to win all weapon on weapon uh contacts, but I was really interested to see what happened. Looking back at the fight, I was definitely playing a bit apprehensive or not apprehensive, playing it a bit safe when I got him upside down and then I was flipped upside down, but because like in my first fight, when I tried to like gyro to self right, I got stuck on my side. So I was really careful to not do that and to just let myself just get a good hit and then flip myself back over. But I definitely lucked out because he just like had difficulty self-righting, which I guess can sometimes be the nature of having that particular design where you're upside down, you don't have enough torque in the weapon to flip yourself back over. But I mean, I got the win, so that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, kind of continuing on. I mean, what's interesting, Nate, is that like looking at the paths that a lot of these robots had to go through, you really had one of the most difficult paths in terms of the robots that you were going up against. Because after fighting IDK, your next match was against Wicked Wedge. And I mean, Remy is just so good. That is a really
Yeah.
well-known bot. And so I'm curious how you felt going into that, because I mean, I would have definitely been intimidated.
So my first thought was, okay, he's got a flipper or lifter. Um, Biggest thing is to take off the wheel guards so that he can't stick me on my side and that there's less area on the sides for him to get underneath. Um, but yeah, I knew it was going to be a tough match. It was going to be like an absolute driving match. Um, it was interesting to be on like the other side of it, of a control bot versus like a vertical spinner match, because with a control bot, you have to fight an almost you have to drive an almost perfect match, because like one good hit from the spinner can absolutely change how the match goes. But I obviously because I have a weapon that can damage him, I just need to get like a few good hits to like at the most like sort of get him off kilter and like put myself in a or put him in a very compromising position where he has to be on the defensive and then he just has to like just survive me for 3 minutes. So um I cranked up the weapon even though I was told that I didn't really necessarily need to, but I was also playing it a bit careful because I didn't have enough time to fully charge the batteries. So I was down to like 16 volts on the lipo. So my biggest fear was running the weapon too much and then just shutting off before the match was over. But I managed to land a lot of good hits on him, and he got a few flips on me, but I think I'm really proud of that match. It was definitely a very well-driven match on my end. And I got to give kudos to Remy because that's a very tough bot. And especially in an event like Norwalk with like a pure control bot, he does like consistently well with that bot. Even if there's no like pit or anything, he's able to take on some really good spinners and come out on top.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So got through that match and you were up against the new version of Supreme Ruler, with the added flamethrower on there. And I mean, I love flamethrowers. They're not something that I particularly want to fight.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what you were thinking going into that, because I mean, you have to kind of like think about those extra precautions because of that too.
Well, when I found out that I was fighting Ruler, I realized that like, okay, I have to adopt the same strategy as Wicked Wedge, no wheel guards, so he has less to get under. I have to run the mini bot because he's running a mini bot. Like for this event, I said, okay, if I am fighting an opponent that has a mini bot, I'm gonna try and be like, hey, let's not do mini bots. But Jeff is like, no, I want to run the flamethrower because it's cool. And I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with it. Flamethrowers, they are cool. Um, I was really nervous about fighting Supreme Ruler because I've seen so many of its fights, and I mentioned this in the what's it the post fight interview that it looked so frustrating to fight. Like I remember rewatching the stream from last year, like finals, and then the September, I believe he qualified where he won. And you could just see like the pain in people's eyes when they're just like they just have to like sit there and watch as Ruler just like picks them up and drives them around the arena. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want that to happen to me. Um, I didn't have any of the gold tape that people use. So I just said, you know what, if I end up in a puddle, then whatever, I was gonna rebuild the bot anyway. There's some stuff I wanted to change. But that was honestly one of the best fights I've ever fought. It might be the best I've ever fought. It was also nice because the mini bots, for the most part, tended to just do their own little thing. So it was mainly me versus Jeff, which I thought was great. Jeff is an amazing driver, and there's a reason a lot of people are terrified of that bot, obviously myself included. But yeah, it was really good. And then obviously I thought I won it. I think it's reasonable to like think, okay, I think I won that one. But when I found out the judges' decision, I was a bit confused. I'm not gonna like knock the judges because they're like I guess they're watching it in the moment. They're fallible. I'm not gonna expect to get I don't think it's reasonable to not expect them to make mistakes. That's just like I said, that's what they do. Um But yeah, when I was confused by the decision. Then I kind of moved on because like I had a pretty good run and I lost to a pretty close decision. But like for the next like hour that I was at the event, people just come to be like, Nate, you got robbed. Which it was funny because like they wouldn't even say hi. They just be like, you got robbed. Be like, okay, you know. I would at least like preferred you just say, "Hey Nate, how you doing? How do you feel about that last match? Are you having a good day?" No, it's just Nate, you got robbed, which, whatever. It happens. I'll deal with it. I'll wait for the like when they elaborate on the judge's decisions, like in a week, I guess. But I had people come up to me being like, you know, Nate, I think you like people honestly said that like I put up a better fight than like the final and that like that fight I had could have been the final, which feels pretty good to know that you fought a finals level fight and it wasn't even the final. Like I would have had to get through two more opponents to get that far.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was a very good fight and it was a very close fight. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to be the one to have to judge that.
Yeah.
So I completely understand. I'm curious though, because everybody kind of goes about the tournament differently. At that point, like, are you the kind of person who just focuses on it one match at a time, or were you already like putting a Mako plan together?
My Mako plan would just be to send it. I didn't really have a particular like, oh, extra thick top armor. It was just sort of if I get through ruler, I've qualified. That's all that matters, and just do my best against Mako. Um, like I prepared for like most of the bots except for like overhead saws, hammer saws, and like flamethrowers. So I mean, I had a spare bot, whatever, you know. Regardless, it would be like it at that point it didn't matter if I like qualified or not. It would have been great to qualify because then I get to bring it back in December, but I just having a good time and I feel like I did so much better than I expected to. And I feel like it really shows like how much I've dialed the bot in since January. Because it's a completely different bot,
Yeah,
much more effective and such.
I would definitely agree. I thought that it looked really good in this
Thank you.
event. And honestly, like one thing that I wanted to ask you about is because you mentioned like the post fight interview when you were talking to Lindsay, and you kind of mentioned that like now you've converted, that you've
Yeah.
decided that you like having the weapon, which is so funny. And again, that's really why I wanted to talk to you, is because we both brought a different kind of bot in January than what we had done in the past.
Yeah.
And you now want to do the spinny weapons, and I actually prefer doing the control bots now. So it's just kind of funny how that
Yeah.
reversed.
Yeah, it's really neat. And I think um like I'm glad I started with a custom design for this particular bot because my first thought was to buy a Peter bar kit, which, you know, I love Peter. I'm not gonna knock anyone who starts out with a kit. Like I started with a kit like 12 years ago. But I just figured, you know, I wanna try my own thing and really iterate from it and like it worked at the start, and then I just like kept expanding upon what worked, what didn't, and now I have this, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. As far as the event overall, I mean, it sounds like you've come away from it, feeling positive about your robot. I mean, I think
Yeah,
that it gives you a really good like place to launch off for next year.
yeah, I'm really excited for because I know there are going to be like more Norwalk events than this year. Like they got rid of the new bot event, which I mean it's a bit of a bummer, but I still think, you know, it's a good idea so that more people have more opportunities to fight at the event. So I'm really excited about seeing what I can bring to Norwalk, and also I'm bringing it to Motorama, obviously. So I'm excited to. I'm just excited to go to more events where I don't, with a bot, where I don't have to worry about driving a perfect match for 3 minutes. I it's just something like it's just so satisfying, like launching other bots. You know, I don't know. I'm gonna sound weird, but there's like so many things about a spinner that I just find so like satisfying. Like when you remove the safety before the doors lock, they're sort of like, all right, it's on. It's like I'm arming like a nuclear bomb. It's like I am ready to inflict as much damage as possible. I don't have to worry about like, oh, am I gonna get enough pins in? Oh, are my like AR 400 forks gonna like dull at the end? No, it's just I go in, I spin it up, and it's great. Honestly, one of the things though that did wasn't at the event that I thought was great is I spoke to David Jin, who made Polywog, which was like the number one influence for this particular bot. And I took a picture of Polywog with Drumder Child. I actually like stole it. I'm putting that in major air quotes from the museum storage because I wanted like to have a picture with it. And David Jim was like really impressed. He's like, "Yeah, great job," especially like with some sort of aspects like how I did the pulley guard because he had a polywog that had a similar setup to Drumder Child. But yeah, it's really nice to like. Obviously, I'm not like necessarily seeking his approval, but it's nice to know from the person whose bot inspired mind that like I'm doing a good job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Trust me, I get it. I started out with a
Yeah.
drum and that's what I wanted to do. And like, yeah, I get it 100%. Well,
Yeah.
that's really awesome. I mean, I'm excited to see what this bot can do in 2025. Maybe bring some resurgence to the drums. Those are some of my favorite robots.
Thank
So
you. Yeah.
excited to see it. Well, good luck for the next year.
Thank you
And
very much. I appreciate that.
absolutely. And for everyone who's watching this right now, stay tuned. There is more to come. So prepare for the next segment.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
And we're back, and we're going to transition from talking about a robot that was new this year to talking about a robot that's been around for a while, and I'm sure has been iterated on quite a bit in that time. So I have Luke here from Minor Threat 5, and we're going to talk about October and how that went. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christine.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely, I mean, I would say that overall, even though, things didn't fully work out in the end, you had a pretty dominant day, which I don't think surprised anybody. Going into the qualifiers first, like the first couple of matches, obviously you won both of those to get into the bracket. So really quickly, if you want to like touch on those fights a little bit.
Yeah, so I think the first fight with Battletoads was not on the stream, but that actually went pretty poorly for me. Um, I lost the weapon 30 seconds in, and I was actually pretty much just carried by Jeff with Ruler. He pushed them around, stuff broke. He kind of saved that one for me actually. Um,
Yeah, I didn't catch that one, but that doesn't surprise me because I mean, it kind of speaks to the effectiveness of Ruler that even in a 12-pound fight that it can do that. So,
right, and he had just taken the robot out of the Master Blaster fight, so it actually ran them both back to back, same battery. We might have had time to switch a fork. That was about it. And luckily for him, the battle tots are a lot lighter, so he was able to, really control that match. And I think he brought it just barely back for me.
well, hey, I mean, a win's a win.
Right.
So,
We take those, but
yeah, for sure. And then I know your second fight was against Grandeur.
right. And then, with a robot like Minor Threat, it's very exposed from the top. So it wasn't one that I wanted to fight. I was hoping not to fight Grandeur and I was hoping not to fight Slam Plan. But we were able to pull that one off with some careful driving and a lucky hit to the frame, knocked a few motors loose, and that was that. They tapped out.
Yeah. Now I'm actually curious because you obviously got a bye in the first round of the bracket, but it's interesting because you potentially would have had to fight Battle Tots again. Was that something where you were thinking you would have preferred to fight them because you had already beat them, or was that not the case?
Well, at that time, I didn't actually. I had managed to avoid learning what Bjorn actually was, because I was kind of busy, putting things back together, helping Jeff out. So I was thinking it would be nice to fight them again because I wanted to actually feel like I won this time. I came out of that last fight kind of feeling like, it wasn't the greatest thing ever. I want to win fights. I want to, feel like I've accomplished something. And I mean, like I say, a win's a win. We take those, but I want to beat robots or lose. I don't really like JDs as much.
Yeah, I feel that completely. As a super competitive person, I understand. Now, actually fighting Bjorn after you did find out what it was, how was that fight for you?
So, I go into that fight and I just had heard, while I was waiting backstage that, I'm qualified win or lose. And so I'm like, okay, low pressure. I don't need to win as much as I thought I did. And then right as we're loading in cage side, they say, if Bjorn wins, it qualifies for the championship. If Minor Threat wins, Son of Cram qualifies. And me and David are, friends. We're both part of we actually have a team, Smooth Brain Technologies, that we sort of collaborate a little bit on things. And I really wanted to make sure David got in, so then I had to win that fight. And that went pretty much perfectly. Jeff is amazing, and anytime they were starting to sort of escape from me, he was able to grab them. If I was on the back foot, he saves it. He's a hero, probably one of the best drivers out there, and he's doing this all while he's running a few other robots. I mean, that was a decisive victory. So that was really exciting to see after the last couple of fights. Well, after the first fight hadn't gone that well.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, that always is a boost. I mean, like you said, it's nice to know that you qualified, but like, if you're trying to help your friend qualify, and it really is just satisfying to get that kind of win. Now that put you in the semis and you were up against Honeyfied, and I mean, Honeyfied is a pretty good robot. So
Right.
like it's no joke. And you were able to get a KO in that fight. How were you able to do that?
Well, in a fight like that, I really have one goal, which is just to put the weapon into their weapon as many times as it takes for something to break. And that's really how I've always handled fighting horizontals. Um, I try not to do anything too fancy. I had picked an armor setup that didn't work completely. You may have been able to see that in the fights. The robot kind of lines up and it sort of bounces off. So I could really only hit them in the weapon. It didn't get underneath the rear of the robot. So I just did what I know how to do, and I pointed it right at them, drove into them, and eventually, stuff broke. So that's kind of what I want to do.
That's always the goal.
Right. At Team Smooth Brain Technologies, we're not big thinkers, so we just do what we know.
For sure. Now you had said earlier you didn't want to have to fight Slam Plan. I'll be talking later in the episode to Brendan to, kind of get his take on things. But how did you feel about having to fight Slam Plan in the finals and how that went? Because it almost seemed like he was even surprised that he got that far with that robot. But I mean, it had a really great day.
Yeah, I mean, Slam Plan's a good robot, and top attack robots like Huges especially are really difficult to fight for traditional verts. Uh, Minor Threat it has a 6-inch disc, which is pretty tall, but still not tall enough to actually directly hit him in most situations. So going in, I already know I'm qualified. I know I'm going to be coming back in December, but I'm not really too worried about any damage I take. So I figured I'd give it my best shot. Maybe I can, pull it off. Like I said before, kind of a bad matchup, but I think it went, really well for about 30 seconds. And then I drive rode the robot up onto a rail, just really messed up, was stuck there until he could take out a couple of belts. And I got back down and I figured, I'm not going to tap out. The robot's fine. I'll see what happens if I really fight one of these things. And from there, I took a bunch of hits, took a bit of damage, nothing expensive, so that went well. We can lose and it still have to be a good fight.
Yeah, it's a bonus when it's nothing expensive. You don't want to have to take your robot home in a bag. That's probably the least ideal situation. So, yeah, I mean, it was a really good fight. It was probably one of my favorite matches of the entire day, overall. But I think that obviously you did pretty well. A dumpster is always nice, but like getting to the finals is still pretty cool also.
Right. I'd like to get a dumpster sometime, but I'm happy with what I learned between the Grandeur fight and the Slam Plan fight about how to fight Huges. So I've never actually come up against one before. I've been in a few tournaments with them, and never actually had to fight one. So I put some features into the robot that were meant to maybe make it a little less vulnerable to them, but some of them panned out, some of them didn't. But overall, learned a lot, and hopefully I'll come back, able to beat Slam Plan in December if I need to.
Yeah, for sure. Let's touch on that too. I mean, like finals are a little over a month away. What is your game plan in the meantime to kind of prepare and get ready for that?
Well, so I'm thinking I'm going to, the robot has been about a year since I've made any major components over aside from a couple of weapons. So I'm thinking I'm going to, order new spares of pretty much everything, and just be as prepared as I can be. And maybe come up with a few different attachments for, some of these robots.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, I'm just curious overall because I mean, a robot like yours, and this is something that you've had for a while. I mean, I think different builders have different approaches. Some are a little bit more where they might have a robot and run it for, a few tournaments, run it for a year or something like that, and kind of move on to something else. But others, really like the design that they have and just continue to iterate on the same thing. What is it about Minor Threat 5 specifically that like you've kind of stuck with this robot?
Well, so I mean, Minor Threat 5, there were four other ones. I had a 15 and then a bunch of 12s. And I've been, every couple of years, I've been redesigning them. And this one has stuck around the longest. And that's really just because it hasn't had any major things that I felt like I needed to correct. There will eventually be, a Minor Threat 6 or something of that nature, but it's not really needed yet. There's still some potential to improve it without having to like, you know, say, well, everything here is bad and I want it to do something different. So that's really what it's been is, you know, I've been able to do every upgrade I've really wanted to without having to majorly redesign. And so I just don't see any reason to spend all that time and effort doing it. Now maybe if I competed more often, but it's fairly expensive to get out to Norwalk, so I only do it a few times a year. And that kind of, drives some of my decisions with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not located as close to Norwalk as some others, so it is a little bit difficult of travel. As I know, being a Midwesterner myself, it's no, I can't go every event. I wish I could, but
Right.
not possible. Well, I'm sure that everybody is certainly going to be excited to see Minor Threat 5 at finals. I mean, that robot just it hits so hard, when it's right on the mark, and I think that it's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the 12s once we get around to December.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good shot. And, I always have a good time when I come out. So really that's more important to me than even winning. I just want to make sure that every fight is exciting, as good as it can be. And that's really why I keep coming back.
Yeah, I mean, that's a simple way of saying it, but it's very true. Well, that's awesome. We'll be excited to see it, and everyone watching the episode, please stay tuned. We're going to talk to the other builder as the other half of that finals match. Talking to Brendan with Slam Plan. So stay tuned for more here on Outside of the Box. All right, and we are back talking more 12 pounds at the October event of NHRL. And this time I am with Brendan Steele, aka Business Cat, to talk about Slam Plan, which I mean I was really excited to see it do so well. Did it surprise you at all?
Well, I'll say this. I've been practicing and designing this robot for so long that any result that has been seen has been expected for a long time. Like, this is peak performance. I fully expected peak performance, and that's what everyone got. So there wasn't really any surprise on my part. I kind of expected this to go the way it did. So
Well,
yeah.
that's good. I mean, confidence going into an event is always a plus, I think. Now we'll kind of talk about some of the fights and how it went for you. Now in the qualifiers before you got into the bracket, you fought Drunken Peasant and Caldera 12, both of which I believe were tap outs. Now, Caldera 12 is certainly a scary robot, but do you think that, like, because to me, when I'm looking at the two robots, a horizontal may potentially have a more difficult time dealing with a robot with like that huge style design.
Yeah, so the whole idea for horizontal spinners was those cambered wheels. And really, I think that setup kind of spoke for itself. It's kind of goofy looking, but when you tilt the wheels outwards like that, you suddenly gain an extra 3 or 4 inches between the wheels where the other robots are supposed to fit between the wheels. And I don't even need to change the width of the chassis or anything. All I do is just bolt the gearboxes on with a different pattern, and suddenly it's 4 inches wider.
Yeah,
So,
I
I mean,
could.
it makes fitting Caldera between the wheels that much easier, which is
Right.
huge.
Right, no pun intended. um yeah, no, I could definitely see where that would be helpful for sure. I mean, pretty easy road there, with that said, to get into the bracket. And I'll note it is interesting and noteworthy to say that every one of your fights was either a tap out or a KO.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just really, speaks to the effectiveness that we've seen from that type of design. And it really like leaves people wondering what made it like take a while for it to be effective, but like now that it is like super effective, I think like we're seeing the results of that. Now getting into talking about the bracket, your first fight was against Ariel Smith and Downpour. So kind of take me through that fight as much as you remember.
Well, when we were up in the pits, they walked up to me and they were like, we kind of want to tap out, but or forfeit, but we have like no parts left, so we're just gonna send it. Because they kind of knew the matchup and the implications. It's a pretty, you know, conclusive on paper match. Big wheel versus tiny vert typically goes the big wheel way by design. So they were kind of expecting to lose, and I respect it, and I respect going into the fight even more. It's kind of an honor to have someone say they would kind of rather forfeit against you than take the damage. But it's always good to actually have the fight, because you show up to these competitions with a fighting robot. You should be fighting the robot. That's kind of my takeaway. So I'm glad they fought. And yeah, it was kind of a quick one.
Yeah, I mean that helps you because then it makes it a little bit easier to go into the next fight, which I think was probably a good thing because the next fight was again Son of Cram, and again I think probably what it sounds like a favorable matchup for you, but David Small is a really good builder, and
Mm-hmm.
a robot that I think has done well, for sure.
Yeah, David's no, slouch either. Like, he has beaten the other 12-pound huge by Joe, I think at least once, maybe twice, in Motorama, with Sonocram. So it's, a bit of revenge there on my part for the rest of the team. But, I think the problem back then was they were running the Tigris wheels, and those are not the best against drum or egg beater spinners. They just transfer too much shock, and they're not floppy enough.
Yeah, yeah, totally fair. I'm curious though with the next fight, because I mean I don't know, I kind of got the sense that I don't know a whole lot about Doppelganger, but it seemed like that was a robot that just kind of came out of nowhere to a certain extent and maybe won some fights that they weren't necessarily expected to win up to that point. What was your thought about that? Because I think they had just come off of beating questionable choices.
Well, I mean, I was so, entranced and focused on my robot. I never really had too much time to scout out all the competition, but I just knew they were, one of those dual egg beaters, just, munching their way through the competition. But again, like it's the same sort of archetype. It's just tiny, compact, vertical spinner that can't really hit my robot. So I was going in with the same amount of confidence as I was for pretty much every other fight.
Yeah. Yeah, you just happen like sometimes the matchups as everybody talks about the rock paper scissors aspect of it, it just tends to work in your favor. I mean, granted, like Slam Plan's an awesome robot, and I think even if you didn't get a favorable matchup, it's still going to do pretty well. But that's
Mhm.
certainly a bonus. Now you get to the finals up against Minor Threat 5, which I mean, it's that robot has been iterated on and been around and been successful for a long time. Hits really hard. Again, probably harder to hit your robot because of the matchup and things like that.
Mhm.
What were you expecting? I mean, did you get what you expected out of that fight?
I certainly got what I was expecting, but ironically, it was one of the bigger threats to Slam Plan just because how long he's been working on it and iterating, and it's actually got one of the larger weapon diameters compared to all the other spinners that I fought. So there was a chance it could hit me, but he beached himself on the wall, and I kind of just killed the weapon right after that. So completely in my favor. It was great.
Yeah, it's always nice when that kind of works out and comes together. I mean, I'm sure obviously exciting winning the event, getting a golden dumpster, qualifying for finals. At this point, what is your plan? Like, what do you have in motion headed into finals? And are there any 12 pounders in finals that you're like, that might not be the best matchup for me, or anybody that you're necessarily looking forward or like not looking forward to maybe having to fight?
So out of like the qualifiers so far, I think the biggest threat is Bumble Blitz because they have the hammer saw. But I already fought them back in February at Motorama. We have a 1-1 record. So currently, the only person to ever beat Slam Plan is Liam, and he will also be there at finals. So I got to come up with some extra strategies or just roll in and send it again, see what happens. But yeah, I don't have too much time to actually prepare for finals just because of the house move and everything that's happening. There's a whole ton of packing going on. So I'm very fortunate that I didn't take much damage, and all I really got to do is just throw a new blade on and maybe get some spare wheels. So I'm in pretty good shape, which is good because I don't have much time.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's so crazy. Because I mean, like that the event just wrapped up, and I mean it'll be just about a month here, a little over a month. And
Mm-hmm.
finals will be coming around. So it happens pretty quickly. Lastly, I'm just curious, for you, like obviously you've been part of Team Huge and stuff like that, but for you, what is it about like that design? I mean, clearly it's a difficult problem for a lot of people to have to deal with. It just presents a challenge that not everybody is equipped to like stand up against. But what is it for you about that design that you just really like and you think is so effective?
Honestly, I don't really know. It's just a cool looking design. It's out there. Not many people know how to protect against it. I mean, even still, people have their ideas of how to defend against it that mostly don't really work. So it's kind of just, advancing the meta. And yeah, it's innovating is what I'm into. So just using that design period is already cool to me. But now that I'm able to implement these other tweaks to the design, such as the cambered wheels and the aerofoil shaped blade, it's incredible. And I mean, I've got some charts if you want to throw them up or anything, but I mapped out like the wattage power draw from the blade versus the tip speed of like 14 different blade designs. Like I have been putting in so much work behind the scenes to identify what, makes a blade efficient. And really it's the shape, just making it aerodynamically less, present. You just don't want it to exist in the air. And I think the results have spoken for themselves. It's insane. Like changing nothing but the blade geometry and getting a 20% increase in tip speed. I don't think I mentioned this on the event also, but the power draw went in half while increasing in tip speed. So it's insane. Like I'm pulling maybe 20 amps at top speed at 280 miles an hour. It's ridiculous. This should not be possible.
That's the great thing about combat robotics. Sometimes until you try, you don't know what's possible. So I love to see it. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's great, and I'm a big fan of innovation. I always speak to that. So I'm excited to see what Slam Plan can do at finals. So again,
Mm-hmm.
much to look forward to there.
I'm calling it now. I'm gonna get the Brett. I gotta get it. It'll go right next to my dumpster.
Well, I then if that happens, I'm gonna have to make sure to clip this afterwards and
You
put
heard
it
it
up
here
there.
first.
Yep, Brendan called it. So, well, we'll see. But those that are watching, please continue to stay tuned to this episode. We're going to bump up to talking about 30 pounds, so stay tuned for more. And we're back with the conclusion of this episode, which is definitely the biggest segment. And I mean, we're talking about 30 pounds, and we also have a group of folks from MIT that I'm really excited to have on to talk about Aries. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Woo!
Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited. I mean, I think prior to this event, everybody already recognized that Aries was a pretty big force in terms of a robot. So we've seen it in the past. It really wasn't a big surprise. But we're going to go through and talk about the fights that you had. First of all, I think one of the biggest stories for me is that I really had no idea how how much you had to rebuild up the robotics program at MIT. So I want to talk about that because I think that's huge. I wouldn't expect that, because to me, when I hear MIT, I'm like, oh, of course they must have a really thriving robotics program all of the time. So how was that, and what did it take to kind of build that back up?
Yeah, I think we do have a lot of programs going on, but it's just combat robotics specifically that kind of fizzled out. Like we had Uppercut, which was the most recent BattleBots entry from MIT. But then over COVID, all the members of Uppercut graduated, and so there was kind of no one left on campus to do any of this. And for 2 years, nothing happened until I came back, and I was like, I really enjoy combat robotics. I'm really passionate about this. Let's try and restart it on campus. And then we did our, a club's fair at the beginning of the year, and all these guys came up to me and they're like, we're also really interested in combat robotics. Brian was like, I've been doing it in high school. And I was like, this is the perfect time to get started. There's a lot of people who are passionate about it. I'm really interested in restarting the club, and now is the perfect time. And just a lot of things came together coincidentally, and it worked out really well.
Well, that's great. I am all about like building up the community and getting more interest in this. I mean, my podcast has been much more STEM forward in general over the past year or so, as opposed to what it had been. And so I think that that's amazing that you've been able to do that. Now, let's get into the event. Before the actual bracket, you had a couple of fights. First, we'll talk about the one against Synthesis 30, just because, I mean, I know Corey personally. He's one of my best friends, and he has done a lot with Synthesis 30. I don't think that was his day. It's definitely looked better on different occasions, but what were you thinking about going into that? Because it's a very scary robot.
Yeah, for sure. I think so that fight was after our first WarHard fight when we got completely trashed. So we only brought 2 copies of the robot to the event. And we're like, we really need to present the robot if we want to go further in the competition. So we were like, try and be a little bit conservative, try and make sure that as much of the robot stays together as possible. And Ryan can talk more about how that translated into driving.
Yeah, so prepping for that fight, I didn't realize their long fork configuration. That was new to me. And we haven't really driven Ares directly into some AR forks yet, so I wasn't sure what that interaction would be. I was hoping we could rip them off, but there was also the possibility that we just kind of bounce off of them, and then that big disc just comes in for a massive uppercut. So we weren't sure what was about to happen. And then I also didn't realize I had a mini until we weighed in, which Ares doesn't like minis a lot. So there was definitely some fear factors going in. The strategy was kind of just spin up and outmaneuver. Synthesis 30 was way faster than I was expecting, which was the final surprise as that fight started. But Ares also spins very fast, and once it hits, wow.
Yeah, that is for sure. We're not really going to talk about the first WarHard fight yet, because I think that it's better to talk about it later when you look at the 2 fights next to each other and in hindsight. But but when you got into the bracket, so your first fight, let's see here, your first fight was against Ghoul, which was a robot that I was not familiar with at that point. But kind of talk about that and what that was like, in that fight.
Okay, yeah, so we didn't know much about Ghoul either, but when we first saw it, the main thing that was apparent to us was they have a lack of reach. That drum doesn't reach very far out from the rest of their frame. So for that one, there wasn't a lot of careful thought into driving. It was really just spin up the weapon and hit something. We figured the odds were pretty good. We just hit frame, and sure enough, that was an almighty hit on their side. Which also credit Ghoul was driving fine. That thing is built really well. It just it went our way. So
yeah, sometimes that's how it happens. Now, your second fight in the bracket and the semifinals was against B-Force. And I mean, personally, since I've followed Team Honeycracked for a while, and I mean, their robots are just built so well and always really exciting to watch. I mean, they've really, as a team, they've done really well this year. What were your thoughts fighting that?
go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, we actually fought B-Force before, but it was actually me driving. So it was actually Ryan's first time fighting against B-Force. So I remember before the match, he came up to me and was like, "What did you do against B-Force? What worked? What didn't?" And I told him, just hit the one that's moving.
So yeah, in June when we brought Ares, I wasn't here, so Tom drove, and he got that first match in against B-Force. So between my experience fighting Barbie and Ken in April, and then his experience with B-Force itself, we pieced together a plan which was kind of the same as always and just hit them. But how we do it can vary a little bit. But going into it, we figured it was going to be a ton of fun. They're a great team. They build great robots, and maybe we are too. I don't know. It's looking like it.
It did seem that way. I'm curious, kind of talking about just because you mentioned Barbie and Ken as well, but the challenges of fighting a multi-bot, because I would say 2024 has really been the year of the multi-bot. I don't think that we've seen that many of them in the past, at least not that many that have been really effective. There's been a number of those that have qualified for finals at this point in the various weight classes. So it definitely, there's a disadvantage obviously to the multi-bot for the bots being smaller, but at the same time, there's two of them and you can't always focus on both at the same time.
Yeah, there's definitely two types of multi-bots. The true multi-bots, I love seeing them, and I love seeing how they're performing really well this year. Tom, I'm gonna hate you for this, but he's had to fight a couple of his 12-pounder, and do you want to speak on that real quick, like what it's like facing multi-bots?
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's mentally confusing sometimes. Because I remember I fought against Battletops a competition ago, and then I fought against Mina and Plusle, and it's like one's doing something, but you're focusing on the other one, and the one you're not focusing on gets behind you, and then it's something else. But I mean, it's always a fun match.
And then it's a little different with Ares because, again, just big weapon in front, we can drive at them without thinking too much. So I find it fun, actually. There's like more targets to hit. My strat against a true multi-bot, I kind of just forget about one and go right after the other. And then at some point, it's like, oh, that one's damaged, let's switch. So I enjoy it. Then there's the mini bots. That's a whole different story. I hate those 2v1s. I cannot wait for next year's rule set. Please get rid of those.
I'm sure there's two camps, I think. There's the people that run the mini bots and don't want them to go away, and there's everyone else. So
I actually don't know about that. I think a lot of people with the minis only run them because it's what you need to do to be competitive. I think they're also looking forward to them going, or at least with a lot of the people I've talked with, they also look forward to them being outlawed. So.
Yeah, that definitely. I think there's probably more that are looking forward to that than not, for sure. Now, as I alluded earlier, we're gonna have to talk about both sides of the WarHard coin. So honestly, in that event, for me watching, I thought WarHard XXL looked the best that I've seen it in any competition. And especially after your first fight with them, I was like, if they did that to Ares, then I'm not really sure that they can be stopped.
Either. we definitely, I feel like kind of everything that we've done during that competition event leading up to that point was just kind of like optimizing what we had left of our spare parts and what we had left of our functional robot for that fight. We kind of saw that that's probably how the bracket was shaking out. And as a result, it was just a lot of anticipation going into it. We were like, all right, this is what we have to give at this point. Like, we've done what we can, and it's really just going to come down to like, you know, like the different strategies and like all the different variables that play in, like once you get into the box.
We've never taken damage like that facing any other robot.
No,
so
it was
insane.
Experience. We couldn't decide what to give them for trophies because we were like, do you want our like fried weapon motor? Do you want our like chopped mainstay?
Yep, here's a bunch of parts in a bag.
Yeah.
So, you know, going into that fight, I'm sure based on the previous fight, there was at least some level of trepidation and like trying to come up with a different strategy because obviously you don't want a repeat of the first one. And honestly, like watching that fight, it was probably one of the craziest turnarounds in a fight that I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was definitely wild, and we definitely spent time talking about strategy. You know, the first fight, we kind of just didn't think about it too much and said, hey, we're going weapon to weapon with him. I don't recommend that for anyone in December. WarHard runs a cast of 2028. You're not going to win that exchange. So going into the second, we're like, oh, okay, you know, we're outmaneuvered. The issue is one of my flaws as a driver is I don't always execute the plan I come up with, and pretty quick I chose not to execute the plan we came up with. So we went weapon to weapon-ish again, but this time it went our way, which was a nice surprise. The two robots we brought to that event were almost identical. The main difference being the weapon motor ESCs. We think that the second ones have a little bit more juice to them, so we're gonna move forward with those from now on, and we think that might be part of the reason why we won that exchange. Yeah, other than that, like they always quote this on BattleBots. Everyone's got a plan so they get punched in the face. As soon as that first exchange happened, it was out the window. We're always in the air and it's all about attacking them as much as we can, keep the pressure on.
Yeah, I mean, with a robot like that, sometimes that's kind of what you have to do. Were you surprised at all? I mean, it was very exciting. It was like I said, it was a really exciting fight, and like the way that it came around, it just I think it was not completely unexpected because again, we know what Ares can do, but it's just like Jonathan Juarez builds really amazing killer robots, and that thing was just looking so unstoppable, and you were able to pull it out, and I think it was probably my favorite story of the day.
It was an absolute shock. I don't think I think we went into that second fight the same way we went into our emulsifier fight in March of, oh, well, we know what's going to happen. Let's just see how long we can last and maybe get a good hit in or two. Going in, even that first exchange was like kind of nice, but once it was over and they were still driving perfectly fine, there was a definite uh-oh moment. And then once we were upside down, it was a definite uh-oh moment. The fact that we survived a couple of those massive hits, especially while we were inverted, and after the unstick, it's still crazy to think about that it was still working. We were missing half of one of our uprights and the weapon was still spinning, and we're still able to deliver that last 1-2 combo to put them upside down against the wall. And that was the moment, if you watch that back, you'll see in the first one, before we send them flying, that's when their upright snaps as well. So when I punt them into the corner next to us, I see them inverted and they're right in front of me. And I notice the part of their upright lying on the ground. And that's the moment where you realize WarHard's weapon is dead and they're upside down. Like that, it changed everything. That was the point where it became like, whoa, we might actually win this. It was, it all changed in a moment, and within a moment, it was awesome.
I think Miles has a really interesting perspective too. Spectating from home, holding down the fort back in Cambridge.
Yeah, so I actually wasn't at the September event. I had commitments back here on campus, but I was watching with also by myself, with some of the team earlier in the day, and then some of my friends later in the day. I was especially around to watch the entire bracket. So I did see that Bane to WarHard final at the end as well. I think that fight really emphasizes two things very well. I think it emphasizes the dynamic Ares has when fighting a robot that's similar to Ares, a robot that's really meant to excel in delivering his weapon system. But I think it also emphasized Ares' advantage of simply being built as a very durable bot, right? The main design difference between WarHard XXL and Ares is that WarHard's mainframe is mostly HDPE plastic, whereas with Ares we mainly use 7075 aluminum. And that really has its trade-offs where Ares is supposed to be more compact and stronger with the impacts, whereas WarHard is really meant to be more or less of a glass cannon. It hits really hard, but all the hits that it takes on its frame does damage over time.
Yeah, those are definitely some good insights for sure. Well, it was exciting. I mean, you finished it out, you got the golden dumpster, and moving on to finals, and kind of with that said, finals is only just over a month away. What is the plan? Like, what are you working on? And do you want a rematch with WarHard, or are you like, I'd rather avoid that one if I
I think we learned a lot from this past event. Like, we've got a list of changes because we've now learned how a lot of the robot breaks, funnily enough, because we didn't know that beforehand, because most of it, we take some damage on the outer parts, but now we see these are the weak points on the really internal pieces. We're going to strengthen a lot of those up, so hopefully we can take a lot more damage without any critical problems. So we'll be more resilient for finals, but we got a lot of work ahead of us because we have got 0 functional robots right now.
We're planning to arrive with at least 3.
Yes.
Looking at the bots that are coming in on this playing field, it's just incredible amount of power, and it's very, very intimidating. So we're prepared to have plenty of spares.
Yeah, that's always a good idea. Show up with spares and preferably completed robots. That's the rule of thumb. So well, that's exciting. I mean, I'm really excited to see Aries performing in the finals, and wish you the best of luck in your preparation in the meantime, because I know that's really half the battle is just getting it ready so that when you show up, it's ready to go and do what it's supposed to do. Cool. Well, that's exciting. I thank you all so much for coming on to talk about it, because it was an amazing event, and just a really cool way to end the day. But for those that are watching this, please make sure that you stay tuned and check out finals. December, it's short time away. Keep watching this show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, share, all of those good things. Keep supporting combat robotics, and we will see everyone next time.
Thanks so much.
Come to